All right, how you guys doing? This is the objectively biased one, the Fog, Steve Fogmeg, here today with little brother, fantasy football, so-called guru, the biased one. David, what's happening, bro?
I don't know. I feel like I've just been slapped in the face. I do like the guru thing. I like that. I can roll with that.
We'll see how far you can roll with that, my brother. With that being said, listen, we got the Thursday night game going on. It's the Packers up 21-7 at halftime, I believe, against the Bears. But we knew this was going to be a shit kicker game, and eventually Thursday night football was going to have to normal out, right? The team that was supposed to win was going to win as well as cover the spread like it's been for the last 2 years.
We say that, but it's been a bit of a strange season, even by early season standards.
True. I'm not going to lie. This has been a very interesting season, to say the least. I'm 2 fantasy leagues, and I'm fucking 1-2 in both of them.
Yeah, I was going to say, interesting. I feel like ripping my head off and throwing it down a bowling alley.
Well, you're the guy that said the young running backs, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it, and contradicted me, and yet here we are. The young running backs are, 4, 5 of the top 15 running backs in the league after 3 weeks. Kareem Hunt is just dominating.
Well, I was expecting
he's doing what we expected Le'Veon Bell to do, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, I was expecting a little bit of normalcy from these teams. Like, hey, we got this young guy. We're not just going to throw everything on his shoulders. Not to mention, some of this shit can't hold up. Look at Dalvin Cook's numbers. He's averaging absurdly high efficiencies, yet he isn't running away with the running back position. So what happens when he comes back to earth?
Well, I don't think he's running away with the running back position. I think he's making
do with the efficiencies he's putting up. He should be. Look at it. There, you look at some of his other numbers. He should be gone, and he isn't.
But that team isn't that good on the offensive side of the ball. You're asking. It's not like you're looking at when you look at Kareem Hunt and what he's doing in Kansas City. The dynamic of that offense is different. What Andy Reid is running over there is completely different. What Minnesota's offense is running is let's just try to create some type of ball control here, and then play action pass and deep six it. I mean, these guys are averaging 13 or 12 to 13 yards per pass attempt, no matter what quarterback it is back there, whether it's Bradford or Keenum. Bradford's been averaging 7.2 yards per attempt for his career, if not less. And this season, they decided to let it go.
Also a little strange that 2 of the 3 best wide receivers in the NFL right now play for Minnesota.
Don't tell Steelers fans that.
Well, no, because the other one is Antonio Brown, so it's fine. They'll get over it.
Well, I tell you what, let's jump right into it, because people are going to be looking to see who's doing what. And I think the who's doing what aspect, we were looking at it, the panic button. Who don't we push the panic button on just yet? I know you got a couple of people. I got a couple of people. So go ahead.
My big winner on not to panic on, Matt Ryan. Don't panic. I don't know why his fantasy numbers are so terrible, but he is 4th in yards per game. He has a 68.8 completion percentage. Whatever is happening right now is not normal. It's an anomaly. That team's offense is not going to turn over the way they turned over in these first 3 games. Those sacks are going to start going away. With that kind of yardage and that kind of efficiency, Matt Ryan will be fine.
I agree with that. I'm going to go a guy that I have in one of my leagues, DeMarco Murray.
That's another good place to go.
Don't panic on him yet. I know he's splitting carries with Derrick Henry, and Tennessee is infatuated with Derrick Henry. But we see that when DeMarco Murray is feeling healthy and that hamstring that has plagued him the entire offseason and the preseason, as he gets healthier, he's going to slowly pull away with the carries and the touches on that team. And this team is not a team that's going to be down by a lot. And this is a team that's not going to be pulling away often. So they're going to lean heavy on the running game, and it's going to be a heavy dose of Murray and Henry. And as Murray gets healthier, you're going to see more of, I think it was a positive note to see him have 14 carries last week and break one of them for a 70-yard touchdown.
Yeah, and you said that the team likes Henry, and yeah, they are definitely interested in Henry as the future. But the official word, and there's no unofficial word coming out from analysts saying, I heard this from this unnamed source, is that Derrick Henry is clearly the number 2. He is their future, and that they are going to ride this DeMarco Murray train until the wheels fall off, which is not a bad idea. That means when Derrick Henry's contract runs up, you get to sign him for a reasonable amount, and you have just bought yourself something between 5 and 8 years of quality running back play.
Yep.
That's kind of a big deal. I think they're looking at this from a economical standpoint rather than saying, hey, we have this talent and we have to throw him on the field. You don't.
Nope, I agree with that 100%. So looking at that and talking about people we shouldn't just hit the panic button on yet. Who should we hit the panic button on? Who should be at that red alert level of concern?
Well, I'm caught. I am tragically caught between two what should be star wide receivers in the league.
Tragically caught. I love the way you phrase that.
Yes, it just makes me so sad.
Tragically.
Well, there is the popular answer, and the answer that's on ESPN all the time. Everyone's talking about whether or not this guy's still elite. There's the Dez Bryant answer. And I think the panic button is has to be pushed. He looks like a completely different person. So on the field. So I think he left the panic button behind a few weeks ago. I think the person to press the panic button on, and the one that's got me completely dumbfounded, is Amari Cooper.
Jesus Christ. Would you steal my thunder? Looking at my numbers? Looking at what I was putting out there? I'm with you. Amari Cooper's got 10 catches in 3 games, and they've decreased dramatically over the course. I think it was 5. Well, not dramatically, but 5 catches in week 1, 4 in week 2, and then 1 this past week. Now, I think what we saw from Oakland was an anomaly. You're talking about a team that had to travel 2 weeks in a row to the East Coast from the West Coast. So I think the jet lag had something to do with that. But I think it is something of note that Crabtree is clearly getting more of the targets, more of the looks, and he's getting more of the red zone opportunities.
And this is a trend that isn't just this year. 2 years ago when he first arrived, Crabtree was clearly a tier below Cooper. Last year, they were pretty much equals, and Crabtree was getting more red zone looks. And now this year, the dynamic has shifted. And every year I have been saying, don't worry, Cooper's going to establish himself. There's not room for 2 top 10 guys on an offense like that. And yeah, I was right, but about the wrong receiver.
No, I'm with you. Like I said, I'm with you on that completely. Cooper is he's been a healthy fail this season thus far. He was a guy that I had in my top 10 as far as wide receivers. When you talk about Dez Bryant, I'm with you again on Dez Bryant. I put something out there about Dez Bryant and his lack of numbers right now. Now, granted, he has had to go up against some I think first 3 weeks, 3 solid defenses. But it's concerning to me because even if it was 3 solid defenses, if Tony Romo was the quarterback, and I hate bringing this clown up, but if he was the quarterback, Dez would be getting Dez would be eaten, basically.
Why is Romo a clown now? Are you a Romo fan?
I am a Romo fan, I am, but he's a clown because he retired. Fuck him. He should have been helping Elway and the Broncos get a Super Bowl, not putting Trevor Siemian out there.
Wow, Jesus Christ, that's a huge "what have you done for me lately."
I tell you what, if you've watched him on with his analytics, he's calling plays before the game, the play goes, and it's sitting there, and you're going, wow, holy shit, this guy really knows his stuff. It's not like Troy Aikman, just a babbling buffoon up there.
Oh, Jesus, don't get me started on Aikman. No, Romo didn't have the talent to constantly finish where he did year in and year out as a top 5, borderline top 5 quarterback almost every single year. So that doesn't surprise me.
But again, I don't. The chemistry between Dak Prescott and Dez Bryant, it took some time last season, and they had their struggles, and they're having it again this season. Now, they had a couple of shifts on the offensive line, which is causing some offensive line struggles, but they should figure that out. But and again, like I said, they played some good defenses these first 3 weeks. But I would say it's alarming that Dez Bryant is I think he has 10 or 11 catches for 111 yards and 2 TDs, I think. Like that
might just be one, but go on. Oh no, you're right. He has 2. Amari Cooper only had 1.
Yeah. So I think that's we're flying into danger zone there when we're talking about Dez Bryant, and I think that's something that, like you said, with Amari Cooper, this could be a sign of things to come. And these are 2 guys that you would have had in your top 10, top 15 as far as wide receivers fantasy wise.
Well, it's funny that you said about the relationship with Dak Prescott. Someone that I am worried about but is performing well at the moment is Dak Prescott. I don't like his relationship with anyone on the team. There doesn't seem to be a favorite. It seems to be the Prescott show. And we've seen that with quarterbacks before. That usually doesn't last very long.
Nope, I'm with you on that. A guy that, man, I want to buy into him, but I just can't. And it's Alex Smith.
All right, well,
I think he's a. I think
money in that bank, so tell me why I should take it out.
Well, here's the thing: Alex Smith is the number 2 ranked fantasy quarterback in football right now, and he's basically banking it off of one game where he had a 30-point game. His last 2 games, I think he yielded 16 and 14 points respectively. And he's coming back down to earth. He went from throwing for over 350 yards week 1 to like he didn't even break 200 yards in week 3. So I'm not going to turn around and say this guy's a solid start. And even though he's ranked number 2 right now, I believe he's going to fall out of that top 10 ranking rather quickly. I think what'll keep him around the top 15 is going to be Tyreek Hill and Kareem Hunt, because these guys are performing phenomenally. But again, I don't believe Kareem Hunt is going to be able to sustain what he's doing right now. I mean, this guy is doing something David Johnson-esque. Are we really going to buy in to back-to-back seasons where, at the end of 2015, we saw David Johnson lighting it up and going, oh, shit, this guy could really be something, to the point where I ranked him as the number 2 fantasy running back prior to last season, and he exploded and was number 1. And now we're going to see Kareem Hunt do something similar to David Johnson. 2 guys they're basically infancy states in the NFL explode and just run away with it.
Well, no, I don't think that's going to happen, but I am. See, I agree with everything you said, yet I'm in the Alex Smith camp. The fact that he does have that ability to explode now like he has never had in the past, combined with how efficient and good he is at managing the game. And quite frankly, yeah, Kareem Hunt and Tyreek Hill are going to come closer to the sun, closer to Earth and away from the sun. But there is talent on that team outside of those guys that I feel hasn't had a good chance to shine. Travis Kelce has been insanely up and down after being the number one super consistent tight end that he was last year. I like this young guy, Chris Conley. I like Albert Wilson. There's talent in that receiving core that's not going to blow up fantasy numbers, but they're guys that can support Alex Smith's fantasy numbers. So I do anyone who has Alex Smith and thinks, "Oh my God, I've got the number 2 quarterback," you're crazy, and there's nothing I could do to help you. But I don't think he slides outside that top 10. I think he's going to slowly ease into the 7th or 8th best quarterback in fantasy this year.
I'd agree with that. Nah. I said I'd agree with that, but I'm struggling with that. I'm thinking about it. I'd agree with him being. I'd say 10. I'd say 10 because I think Blake Bortles is going to make another top 10.
Look, Bortles is having a good year, but this is that team doing good, and I can't get past the fact that the Jacksonville coach said that his perfectly desired amount of throws from his quarterback would be 0 in a game. That's the biggest slap in the face you could ever throw someone's way, especially when your running back's a rookie. And yeah, Leonard Fournette's putting up numbers, but he's putting up numbers in volume. He's got like 80 touches for his 200 yards. He's barely getting anywhere.
Yeah, no, I think his yards per carry is under 3.6 or 3.7.
Yeah, it's bad. It's not good.
Yeah, his yards per carry
of any running back.
His yards per carry isn't good, but I look at Blake Bortles and he's done exactly the opposite of Alex Smith. He's increased. You're talking about a guy that went from throwing 125 yards and a touchdown in that victory against Houston to 233, 244. Now, again, what he did against the Ravens, Ray Lewis jinxed the Ravens by kneeling. Let's call it what it is. He knelt in solidarity. Well, according to him, he just knelt in prayer, and he clearly wasn't praying for the team to have success that day because they didn't show up. But Blake Bortles lit them up. But this is what Blake Bortles does. He has about 4 or 5 games, in the last 3 years where you're going, holy shit, this guy is remarkable. And, last week, the 4 touchdowns, Mercedes Lewis, he's that guy again that has 3 or 4 games every season. This guy will average less than 7 points a goddamn game for the entire season, except for those 3 games where he catches 3 or 4 touchdowns in a game, and you're going, damn it, I should have started his ass. And that kind of saves Bortles' ass as well. And this team defensively, they're a very good defensive team. Forget fantasy. Take fantasy aspect out of it. This is just a very good defensive team and a very young defensive team. And I think Bortles is, with the running game between Ivory and Fournette, the way they're pushing it, the guy really might have some success this year. And his top 10 finish this season might not be garbage time. It might be real time.
Okay, I mean, I can see that happening. I do think he has the talent for it. My concerns are twofold. One, being support from the team, but 2, being his numbers during this time. So at the moment, Jacksonville has participated in 2 major blowouts. They destroyed Baltimore and they destroyed Houston. They also participated in, I guess, what you would call a 3rd blowout, in where Tennessee took them to the woodshed. If you look at his numbers in those games, he's very inefficient. Low yardage, low yards per attempt, low everything. I just can't picture that panning out when the games start getting tougher. This last week, week 3, he completed 64.4% of his passes. That was his best number by a mile. He's improved leaps and bounds each week, and I expect that number to be relatively high or to be better than what it's been. But he's barely getting any yards per catch. I think it's something like 7 or 8 yards, and that was last week, not when you include week 1 and week 2. I just can't see the numbers working out where his usage is so low. And even in that blowout against Tennessee, they never stopped and said, hey, we got to catch up. They just kind of gave up. They're not going to put the ball in his hands to win the game.
No. And no one, I'm not saying that they're going to put the ball in his hands to win the game. I'm just saying that
thing, though.
He's going to be
Giants
more.
Do it with Eli.
Well, Eli has 2 seasons where he's managed to show that if you throw enough shit against the wall, something will stick.
I am not going to comment on the stickiness of Blake Bortles. We'll just mention he is in Jacksonville.
And shit slides down the wall because of the humidity down there. You know what? Another quarterback. We're in the process of us blasting Pittsburgh because the only positive thing coming out of Pittsburgh is Antonio Brown, Ben Roethlisberger, and his numbers this season so far. With the first 3 games of the season, what's going on with this team, and why do they look so wildly up and down, even though his numbers are pretty good? When you look at the way the team overall on an offensive aspect is playing, they don't look that great.
I would say I could answer any other question that you ask me but that one. I don't know what's wrong with that team. I don't know why they went from being this unstoppable powerhouse through the last couple of years, anytime that Roethlisberger wasn't hurt, because he's had a lot of injuries, and at those times they've had a downturn in their offense. But I don't know what the hell's happening there. This is, for me, that's the unexplained mystery of the season so far.
I mean, you look at Ben. He's got 5 touchdowns. He's got 1 pick. I'm looking at it now. He scored 15, 16.8, 11.6 points. That's Jameis Winston-like numbers.
Which is garbage.
Exactly. I mean, he's teetering just at the back end of the top 20. And you've got Le'Veon Bell, and you've got Antonio Brown, and the return of the Martavius Bryant, and yet you still you're from a fantasy aspect. While he's consistent, he's not consistent the way you would expect an elite quarterback to be.
Well, Le'Veon Brown is the big question mark there. I can explain better.
Le'Veon Brown.
Yeah, they merged together. All of their numbers go to Antonio's stats.
Dragon Ball Z fusion on the Steelers football field.
Yes.
Huh?
That is why Antonio Brown's numbers are through the roof and Le'Veon Bell can't be found. Le'Veon Bell is the answer to Roethlisberger being so bad, but I can't explain Le'Veon Bell. And Martavis Bryant is a little bit of that answer, too. A lot of people thought he was going to come out and be a superstar the second he came back. I don't know why. He doesn't even have I want to say he doesn't even have a 40-catch season. Like, what is his best year? I don't think Martavis Bryant's done anything. So I understand people thinking, okay, when this guy comes back, we could go places, but to automatically anoint him as something special, it's kind of blowing up in their faces now. You don't really have anyone else putting up significant yardage on that team. Jesse James has been good in the red zone, but that's just it. He's a red zone target. It's been the Antonio Brown show, and that's been all they have. Le'Veon Bell, I don't know what happened there. His yards per carry have fallen out the window. They're not throwing the ball his way. It's like they're outthinking themselves.
Oh, that's typical in the NFL, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, it's like, I don't know. Pittsburgh seems to be getting into their own way somehow because they are too talented to be doing what they're doing right now. I can't put my finger on some outside force doing anything to them. They're too talented.
All right, so let's go by position here. I like to play this game. Let's go by position. Let's pick one guy who you think is going to shock everybody. And it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be like, oh, this elite guy, but somebody that's going to shock fantasy owners this year and someone that is going to extremely disappoint fantasy owners this year, just based on the 3 weeks that we've got so far. Who would be the one quarterback that you've got that may shock fantasy owners and the one quarterback that, you know what, you're going to be cursing his name throughout the whole season?
Well, my quarterback who's going to shock people is kind of a trick question. People are a trick answer. People are on his case now, but I think he's going to shock people by what happens with his star players. And that, for me, is Deshaun Watson. I think he should have come into starting week 1 right off the bat. I have no idea why Savage was even allowed to cross the out-of-bounds line and step onto the field unless he was giving someone water. And yet they let him play for a whole 2.5 quarters. But I think Deshaun Watson is a big talent coming into the league. And he does have a huge learning curve going from that Clemson offense to any NFL offense. So I think each week you're going to see him improve by leaps and bounds. And what you have seen already through the first 3 weeks is some pretty good fantasy numbers from Lamar Miller and DeAndre Hopkins, but terrible efficiencies. DeAndre Hopkins is the most targeted receiver in the NFL by a mile. The only guy even close to him is Antonio Brown, and he's not putting up Antonio Brown numbers. So I think you're going to see him start improving his efficiencies as Deshaun Watson gets better. And I think you're going to see Lamar Miller start putting up better yards per carry as teams start realizing that this is a passing offense that's not just going to roll over and play dead like it did last year.
All right. I'm going to go with I'm going to stick with the Deshaun theme, and I'm going to go DeShone Kizer.
Okay.
And I'm taking Kizer because if you look – Huh?
Do tell.
Well, I'm taking him because I think he could finish in the top 20 fantasy quarterbacks. And we're talking about a guy that's thrown to Kenny Britt and nobody else. We're talking about a guy who's got Isaiah Crowell in a running game that is just struggling. Yet he's managed to put up 17 and 21 fantasy points in 2 games. And let's face it, he's going to go through growing pains against some better defenses and teams in the league. So Baltimore, he just completely shit the bed with his 3 picks and 1 fumble. But I don't think that's going to be a norm for him. I think this guy, with the schedule that they've got, looking at who they've got to play, I think he's going to continue to get better and be more effective and efficient in the passing game. And again, Hugh Jackson is not going to throw Kizer under the bus. So I think Kizer is going to be somebody that impresses and finishes, even though he's a backup quarterback, in my opinion. If you've got him, he's a backup and he's a situational starter, depending on the week that your starter is off. I think Kizer is going to be that guy that you sit. Kizer is going to be that guy that I think people were hoping or believing that Jameis Winston was going to materialize or is possibly going to materialize into. I think DeShone Kizer is that guy, and I expect to see more good games from Kizer than bad games this season. Upwards, I expect him to see games where he's going to average, 14 or less points fantasy-wise, but I think there's going to be about 6 or 7 games. He's already got 2. Where he's going to be up over 17 to 20 points, fantasy points in those games. And that's going to be good enough to put him into that top 20.
I like that answer. The only reason that's not my answer is, and you mentioned it, his wide receivers, man.
Yeah.
Kenny Britt he had his big season last year, and everyone's like, oh, Kenny Britt, Kenny Britt. Kenny Britt caught 50-something passes last year. That's not a big season. That's not something to celebrate. And now he's dropping everything that comes his way. It's like he's actively trying to play bad.
Yeah, he looks horrible.
And Corey Coleman's a talent. He's developing, but I look at him more like a project like Nelson Aguilar, who is now starting to show dividends, 3 years later, 4 years later?
Yeah, 3 years later.
And I think that's going to be the same progression with Coleman. So I think for this year, DeShone Kizer is stuck with two drop machines that are slot receivers on any other team. And that's going to be tough. But I do agree with you on his pluses and his abilities. I just worry that the team is not going to help him fulfill that.
I'm banking on Hugh figuring it out.
I wish I could bank on that. What he did in Cincinnati was fantastic, but he doesn't seem interested in doing that in Cleveland.
So who's your quarterback then? That's going to be the guy that, this guy you're going to curse him out.
I want you to guess. You know the answer. Huh?
Who'd you say?
I said I want you to guess. You know who it is.
Russell Wilson.
Russell fucking Wilson. Oh, I hate me some Russell Wilson. Let me get my shovel.
Russell Wilson is David is about to bury the sea chickens, people. Get ready.
So Russell Wilson for 3 years defied all the odds on the planet, made me want to pull every hair out of my head with his efficiencies and his touchdowns and all this other bullshit. And then last year it finally happened. Last year he finally paid the price. He became a normal quarterback, and his numbers don't support a normal quarterback finishing in the top 10 among fantasy QBs. He just doesn't put enough touchdowns. He doesn't get enough yardage. He doesn't play enough because he's not good enough to constantly have the ball in his hands. So now we come to this year. And this year he looks okay because he put up that 30 or 40-point fantasy game, depending on how your league is set up, against the Titans. But look at his numbers, and you'll see that there is some serious concerns, things that would make you go, no, I don't want this on my team. Most importantly, 2 of his 3 games, he's thrown for less than 200 yards. And even in those games where he did not have, one of them he had a crazy amount of attempts and threw an unbelievably terrible 5.08 yards per completion. I don't know how you do that. I don't think I've ever seen a number like that. And he managed to put up less than 200 yards, and he threw the ball one shy of 40 attempts. That is mind-blowing to me. He went from the most efficient quarterback in the world 2 years ago to now he can't even compete with the averages. Even in his big game last week where he blew out Tennessee, he put up those numbers throwing the ball 49 times. Those 49 attempts still only completed for an average of 7.61 yards per completed pass. Again, that is the averages. That's not even great. And that's his big game for the season. And he had 4 touchdowns and no interceptions. That's a big part of why he is looking okay right now. He's got 5 touchdowns, no picks. 4 of those touchdowns are in one game. He's bound to throw an interception eventually. And a key point as to why he hasn't is look at who he's played. The Green Bay Packers, the San Francisco 49ers, and the Tennessee Titans. With the exception of Eric Reed, can you name another quality starter in the secondary on any of those teams? Go ahead, I'll wait. Because Tennessee lives and dies on the front 7, and Green Bay doesn't play defense, except against Seattle.
I'm good. My quarterback.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going. I'm going to keep on running. As of now, Russell Wilson has played through the easy part of his schedule. Good luck going forward.
I hate to say it, but I have to agree with that. I think he might be a guy that slides out of the top 10 that I had in the top 10. My guy is going to be Jameis Winston. Everybody was so high on Jameis Winston this year, believing that he could be a top 15 quarterback. If you're in a 12-team league, you might have picked Jameis Winston as your starting quarterback. And if you did, you might be thoroughly confused or misled by his numbers this season. He had completed 70% of his passes last week in a losing effort, getting annihilated by Case Keenum and the Case Keenum and the Minnesota Vikings, 34-17. But what's concerning to me is that he's got 3 touchdowns and 3 picks. His quarterback rating, his passer rating in week 2 was a 91. Last week an 80, and it just seems to be continuing. You would expect after a 2 seasons in, there you start to see some stability, and he's starting off this year. 3. He's starting off this year the way he's been playing since he come into the league, up and down. Jameis Winston is just a roller coaster, and his fantasy points are going to go as such. He's going to be a guy that's going to give you anywhere between 12 and 16 to 17 fantasy points almost every week, which is pretty consistent, but he's not going to be that guy that's going to break the bank on you. He just can't do it. He's entirely too up and down, and his success as a fantasy quarterback and as a regular quarterback in the NFL is predicated on Mike Evans and what Mike Evans is able to do. Jameis Winston is a guy that he is going to make you cry. And if you're a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, you're going to hate him by the end of this season. So that being said, let's run to the running backs. Give me a running back that you think is going to explode and is going to make you happy. South Park happy.
I don't know if I really have an answer for that. I think a lot of the running backs that are doing good are already there. They've just had one game or just really haven't had a consistent presence. They've just blown up in one game or another. And I feel like those guys are going to do fine. If you're worried about them, I guess if I had to pick hey, don't worry, this guy's probably going to be okay, even though his numbers are looking good as it is, I would say DeMarco Murray. I think that I've already pointed out what I think Deshaun Watson's going to do. Oh, well, Deshaun Watson, wrong guy, wrong team. I've already pointed out some of the issues that Tennessee has had this year in some of the other topics we've covered because of the teams that they've played. His nagging injury, I think, was a big part of what led to him struggling early in the season. And I think Tennessee, for a quick moment, had this idea, this belief that they were going to come in and we have all these receivers. We got Corey Davis. Rashard Matthews is still here. We're going to come in and rock it. People are just going to respect the passing game because they know we have it. No, they're going to make you prove you have it. And then through week 1, they didn't prove it at all. Through week 2, they struggled again. And I think they finally got the memo that you can't just put it on paper. You need to actually do something with it. And I think that's going to hugely benefit DeMarco Murray in that running game.
I agree with that. I think a guy that's going to that's going to surprise everybody and that's going to really put some quality numbers up. And I didn't think so at first, and I know last week was a bad game for him. But C.J. Anderson, he's healthy. This team is going to continue to feed him the ball. Yes, Jamal Charles is going to get carries. But I think as this season progresses, I mean, you look, the first 2 games, he had 45 carries for almost 200 yards and a touchdown. Yeah, they're not going to stop feeding this guy the ball. And again, providing he stays healthy, I think CJ Anderson this is a guy that once he gets into a groove, he's going to be hard to stop. And he's shown this when he has been healthy, that as the season progresses, he gets better. So I think CJ Anderson is going to be a guy that is going to shock a lot of people this year and quite possibly finish in that top 15 of running backs.
Wow. I have to completely disagree. I agree with just about everything you said about CJ Anderson, except that groove. I don't think he's built for the long haul. I haven't seen a situation. I haven't seen CJ Anderson in a year have 15 plus touches in 4 or more games and actually still be playing. Maybe not 4 games, but it seems like CJ Anderson's max is he give you about 6 games and then he dies. So maybe he'll be there for you in the fantasy playoffs, but you better make sure you can make it without him. Because I don't believe in CJ Anderson as a long option. And the way this team is playing, either they're going to settle into a situation where Anderson's not going to get the touches, like in week 3, where he did not get the touches, or they're going to burn him out. Either way, I don't think he finishes in the top 10, and I think he's going to struggle to finish in the top 15. I do think he's a viable option. If that team gets into a groove of balancing him and Jamal Charles out, he will be a viable option, but I think a viable flex option. Or maybe a low-end number 2 running back even. That wouldn't be something you're upset with, but I think if you're banking on his current production maintaining, I don't see it happening. It hasn't happened yet. I'm gonna bet the averages.
All right. Who's your fall off? Who's the guy that's going to make you cry this season?
Todd Gurley. I don't know. I think it's just the Rams in general. Todd Gurley, I think, is an easy man to bet against. I bet against him every year, and up until right now, it had been panning out fine. A lot of his production this year is heavily reliant on touchdowns. Yeah. He's got 6 touchdowns through 3 weeks, which for him is like hitting the lottery. He's never seen anything like that before in his career. But he's not being very efficient. The Rams' offensive line has looked better than it's ever looked before, at least with him playing on the team. I think that offensive line is overplaying, so I do think they come back down to earth. And he's averaging 3.8 yards a carry with that offensive line on 1,000, on playing on cloud 9. What happens to that number when they start playing normal? And he's gotten an absurd amount of touches as it stands. From what I can see, he's the league-leading running back in touches.
Yeah, he's got 63 attempts in 3 games.
He's not in the top 3 in yardage. And only one other guy on that list is even within 15 touches of him. That's significant.
I'm going to disagree with you with Todd Gurley, and I'm a guy that I'm not a Todd Gurley fan either. When everybody was singing his praise going into last season, I struggled keeping him in the top 10. People had him as a top 5. I wanted to put him out of the top 10. I just put him out of the top 5.
I didn't put him in the top 10.
No, you didn't. I will give you that. But I think there's one key thing that I'm seeing this season that it's carrying over from his previous season. He had 58 targets last season and 43 receptions. 0 touchdowns in the receiving game. This year, he's already got 17 targets, 13 receptions, and 2 touchdowns. His receiving prowess going forward is going to be crucial. And I think he is becoming that multifaceted back. He's a guy that he's really, in 3 years, he's changed the nature of his game where he is capable of not only being a running back, but he's also becoming a receiving threat out of the backfield. And I think this season, adding the deep threat that you have with Sammy Watkins, a much more efficient wide receiver, provided he's on the field, of course, than Kenny Britt was. I think Todd Gurley is going to still experience success going forward. I think this guy's probably going to, he's got 4 touchdowns right now
on the ground
this season on the ground. 6 total. He's got 6 total, so I think he eclipsed his total touchdowns last season already. I think this is a guy that's probably going to score 7 or 8 more times this season because he's that guy in the red zone. You see his usage in the red zone, and he's the guy that's being targeted, not only being given the rushes and the carries in the red zone, but he's also now being targeted in the red zone as a receiver. And I think that is going to be crucial for him going forward. I think Gurley, while the yards per attempt is dangerously unnerving for me, and I agree with you 100% on that, I think the fact that he has transformed his game and become more of a receiver running back is going to help him out in the long run, especially on this Rams team.
Okay, I could see that being true, but I have 2 more things to throw at you. 2 things that disturb me and concern me about him going forward. One of them being the games that he's played in, a 46-9 blowout of Indianapolis, 27-20 game with Washington, and a 41-39 shootout with the 49ers. He has participated in 3, 2 of them being absurdly high-scoring games, at least for his team in one of them, and then a third game where that was a fairly high-scoring game. 27-20 is not a low score. And in these games, he has not been efficient. He has relied heavily on big plays, either through the air or on the ground. And I just don't find that to be a super reliable thing over the long haul. So I think as his big playability becomes more normalized, you're going to see his numbers take a hit because of that. But then the other big number, and the thing that kind of surprised me because it's gone under the radar in these big games they've been in, Todd Gurley has already fumbled the ball 4 times. That is not what you want to see from a player that you're planning to give the bulk of your touches.
No, that I will concede there. That has me concerned.
So Todd Gurley, I can't. Everything in my heart tells me to hate Todd Gurley. And when I look at the numbers, it backs it up. And so I've got a feeling and I've got evidence to back it up. I don't care what he's ranked in fantasy. It's going down.
All right, we'll disagree there as well. Wide receiver. Give me that guy that is going to make everybody happy that no one's expected him to.
Well, I don't know if he's going to make people happy, but I don't think his numbers stay what they are. Julio Jones. Now, I have been a proponent that Julio Jones is eventually going to fall off. But this year, if you look at Julio Jones and you look at all the other receivers in the NFL, his biggest his most similar player that he's been to is Pierre Garçon, who is trapped in San Francisco and who is old as shit as well, and makes his bread and butter on short passes and doing a little something with that. And that is what Julio Jones's numbers look like. I don't care if you're off the Julio Jones train or not. That doesn't make sense. That does not compute for me. And he's one of the top receivers right now in catches and yardage. I just can't see. It's like, I don't know. He's been trapped somehow. He's just not in sync, yet he's still playing well. Something's got to give. Julio Jones is a big play receiver, and he's going to get a couple big plays at some point, and it's going to break him out of whatever funk he's in. Does he end up moving up significantly? I mean, he's ranked in most leagues. He's ranked somewhere between 15 and 30, depending on what you're putting points in. I don't think he moves into the top 5 like he usually would have been, but I think Julio Jones is a top 10 fantasy receiver. Will get back to the top 10 and will do good but not great numbers. And right now, he's not doing good.
I think a guy that's going to pleasantly surprise people this season, and it's Stefon Diggs' counterpart, Adam Thielen.
Ooh, I love me some Adam Thielen. Tell me.
These guys are annihilating teams right now. It doesn't matter who they get, and these guys they're basically splitting targets. I think that you got the one major difference. Diggs is getting all the touchdowns right now. At some point in time, those touchdowns are going to stop going to him, and they're going to go to someone else. We've already seen Dalvin Cook get into the end zone. We haven't seen Thielen get into the end zone yet. And this guy was somebody that was high on a lot of fantasy people, experts' radars this season as a potential breakthrough guy. And seeing what he's done thus far, I got to say I'm on board with it. He's got 19 receptions for almost 300 yards, and he had 24 fantasy points in week 1. Came down a little bit, 7.4 in week 2. And he's got 14.8 last week. And again, no touchdowns. He hasn't scored a touchdown yet. And they're doing it with just shitty quarterback play. Providing that you can continue to feed the ball and control the clock the way Minnesota's controlled the clock and used and leveraged Dalvin Cook in the running game, it's just a matter of time before Thielen starts lighting it up too. Teams are going to be putting their number ones on Diggs. And Thielen, I think, is a better route runner than Diggs is at the current moment. And I think he's going to make some significant strides, and he's going to be a guy that is a solid wide receiver 2 on your team. Depending on how deep your league is, he could be your number 1 flex. But I'm saying Thielen is a number 1, your top wide receiver 2 on your team.
I can roll with that.
Who's your failure? Who's going to make him cry?
Well, you've named the team. I'm going with the counterpart.
Oof.
Stefon Diggs.
Really? With everything he's doing?
Here's why Stefon Diggs. And this is going to require some explanation because, man, is he going off. You've named part of my reason. He has a teammate who's putting up nearly identical numbers and yet has none of the touchdowns. What I would also point out is said teammate has 50 more yards after catch. And said teammate, I think, is a better player. So Stefon Diggs, who's living and dying on these touchdowns, is eventually going to come back to earth. The other thing is, right now, Stefon Diggs is on pace to put up touchdowns like no other. He is on pace to fall just shy of breaking the touchdown record. I have no belief that he can maintain that pace. I have no belief that he's going to even maintain half of that pace. I give Stefon Diggs at best 12 touchdowns in the season, and he's on pace for 21 and change if you could get a partial touchdown. So I just don't see that as a possibility. But, hey, he's doing great. Why do you think he's going to fall off? Well, my argument's going to come down to a couple of things. If you look at the numbers of wide receivers, Stefon Diggs is putting up numbers similar to 3 guys who you would consider top receivers. T.Y. Hilton, Brandon Cooks, DeAndre Hopkins. I do not see him as a T.Y. Hilton or a Brandon Cooks. These are guys who have low yards after catch, not quite as low as Stefon Diggs, who's putting up a paltry 21 yards after the catch in total, not per game. In total, he has caught the ball and gotten 2 first downs. That's it. He's putting up lower yards after catch than these 2 guys. These are guys who live and die on the deep ball. I don't think Stefon Diggs has the same deep ball ability as a T.Y. Hilton or Brandon Cooks, which means he's going to have to, and he's played that way through 3 weeks, would have to maintain. I think that's going to go away a little bit. The other guy that he's playing a lot like is DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins in most leagues is probably not in your top 10, or if he is, it's because of volume, because he does have a lot of catches. DeAndre Hopkins has a paltry 8 yards after catch. Now, that's not his fault. It's because he plays on Houston. There's no one else to throw to. And for 2.5 quarters, which amounts to nearly 1/4 of the time that Houston has been on the field, for some inexplicable reason, Tom Savage was throwing the ball. But where this does come into play is DeAndre Hopkins is currently 18th in total yardage. Stephon Diggs is 3rd. I think you're going to see Stephon Diggs finish a lot closer to 18th than he does to 3rd. So if his touchdown numbers regress, his yardage regresses, where does he finish? And right now he's number 1 among fantasy wide receivers. I think he struggles to maintain a top 10 position. I think he has a good year for a wide receiver, finishes with a solid, 70-something catches, but I think he struggles to stay in the top 10.
Man, with the numbers he's put up, man, that's going to be a tough sell there.
I'm buying it. I'm putting it on layaway. I'm picking it up for Christmas.
My guy is going to be Odell Beckham Jr.
Tell me more, because I hate me some Odell.
When you look at Odell, and he had a spectacular game last week against Philadelphia, but he also had a spectacular game against a Eagles secondary that is completely makeshift right now, and riddled with injuries, and their front seven got hurt as well. They're losing Fletcher Cox, Jordan Hicks. So there's some serious issues going there with the Philly secondary. But I think it's not talent. This man's a ticking time bomb. And his the way he's acting and his attitude and just his demeanor on the field is really, really concerning to me. You're talking about a guy who also was averaging over 12 and 13 yards per reception in his first 3 seasons. This season, he's averaging just shy of 9 yards per reception. So Eli has ironically dropped into the bottom third over the last 2 years in yards per attempt. So he obviously he doesn't have the arm that he once had, and he's not able to hit that deep ball the same way. Age is catching up to him, even though he seems like he's been indestructible and has Wolverine type regeneration because the guy just can't get hurt for nothing. I think Odell is going to struggle this year. Teams are keying in, and the more frustrated he gets, the less he performs. And I think
the highest paid player in the NFL.
I think the inconsistency this season with him, you saw him put up a 28-point game last week. I wouldn't be shocked if the next 2 weeks he doesn't crack 10 or 12 points. And I think that's going to go also flow with the way the offense is. That offensive line is completely atrocious this season. I mean, last season they were able to at least keep Eli upright for a little bit. As the season progresses, that line just looks like shit. They still don't have a running game. And Eli's getting older. It doesn't bode well. It's not a good recipe for Odell to finish, in my opinion, as a top 5 fantasy wide receiver this year.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you say that the Giants line at least was serviceable last year. If you look at the numbers, they were really good.
Well, in pass protection. They were really good in pass protection.
So they went from being a above average pass protecting team last year to this year, they're terrible across the board. They used to give Eli 3 or 4 seconds, and now at that mark, he's getting crushed.
Yeah.
Whereas before, he would just have to dance around a little bit. They're in trouble. Sterling Shepard should probably finish the year as the top point getter for that offense, I'm assuming. And then you look at that tight end.
Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of him to have a really solid fantasy year, but he is a big red zone threat. And Odell Beckham has made his bread and butter on being a top touchdown scorer like a Dez Bryant. And away, that's going to be a big part of what's missing this year from his numbers.
All right. Well, this week, your teams. Who's your shoe-in guy this week? Who's a guy that's definitely going to perform? That you're going to turn around and say, you know what? You have to start this guy. And don't give me an obvious starter. Give me someone that's more innocuous.
Don't give you an – wow. I mean, that's a serious question. That's – and me throwing my hat in some ring. This is kind of a hope and a wish. I just think that this guy has to break out at some point. But I like the matchup. I like what just happened with Seattle against this team. I'm going DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins finally has that big breakout game where he puts yards after catch and gets touchdowns and gets like 150 receiving yards. It's got to happen.
It's got to happen. The numbers got to equate, right?
Yeah, the numbers got to do something at some point. And I really believe in Deshaun Watson. I really believe in this Houston team as a legitimate a contender. I'm so into Deshaun Watson finally showing what he showed 2 years ago under Brian Hoyer. Come on, Deshaun Watson. You could give me a Brian Hoyer performance.
I think for me, the guy that is he's definitely floating under the radar right now, but I think he's going to put up some numbers this week and is going to really like explode on people, in my opinion. And it's not a guy that he hasn't really put these numbers up yet. But it's going to be Demaryius Thomas. He's been consistent week in and week out. He's been putting up solid numbers, anywhere between it's double-digit numbers every week. But I think this week against Oakland, they're hosting Oakland. This is going to be Oakland's third road game in a row, if I'm not mistaken. Emmanuel Sanders has put up some spectacular, has had a couple of spectacular weeks. I think it's Demaryius Thomas time. I think he's a guy, he's an obvious starter, but he's not an obvious starter. You're not looking at him going, oh yeah, this guy's going to, I'll get a 12 or 13 points out of him. I think this week you're going to get like a 20-plus point game out of him this week.
No, I mean, you basically picked another DeAndre Hopkins, a guy who's getting 5+ catches a game, but is not getting the extra yardage and is not getting the touchdowns, and it's not his fault. It's the quarterback.
I've got one more.
Ooh,
I've got one more. I got one more team that I think is going to shock you, and they're going to shock you on the defensive side of the ball this week. And I think it's going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars. They shocked everybody against Baltimore. They're playing the Jets this week. The Jets I think the Jets shot their load. I mean, that is a dumpster fire that only Jay Cutler and the Miami Dolphins could have fucking surrendered a win to. And I think the Jacksonville Jaguars this week, their defense is going to do some serious damage against the New York Jets. I wouldn't be shocked if, anywhere between 15 to 20 points comes from that defense this week.
Well, that's funny you say that, because if I was going to throw a wild card defense out there that I like, it would be the New York Jets. I like what they've done in stymieing running backs. The Jaguars seem to have no interest in giving the ball to their quarterback, so they're going to keep giving it to their running back who can barely even consider getting 4 yards per carry. I think he gets stymied again. I think that game's going to be a shit fest. Be lucky if 300 yards get put up between the two of them. I mean the teams, not two players.
You know what? You could have the defenses being the high scorers on both those teams.
I would not be surprised at all. I wouldn't be surprised if the only touchdown that was scored was defensive, since you're saying the Jaguars' defense is going to go all ham on the Jets. Don't be surprised if that game finishes like 13-9, and the only touchdown was a fumble recovery.
And who's the guy who? Let's see who is the player that is going to be. We shouldn't start this guy. You have to start him. You know you want to start him, but you shouldn't start him.
Well, I'm just going to keep going with my theme here. Leonard Fournette.
I'm not going to disagree with that one.
Leonard Fournette has put up a touchdown in every game. That's not something that's sustainable over a 16-game season. I can't think of a situation where a player scored a touchdown in every single game of the season. It's probably happened twice, maybe, in history, and that could be wrong. It may have never happened. So at some point, Leonard Fournette's numbers are going to catch up to him. He put up 100 yards in week 1. That was on 26 carries. So he averaged less than 4 yards a carry in that game. Since then, he hasn't even put up 60 yards in a game. I fully expect this game is going to be on the road. I fully expect that Leonard Fournette probably gets somewhere between 15 and 20 carries for about 50 yards and no touchdowns.
I'm going to go with Ben Roethlisberger. Ooh. They're going into Baltimore. Baltimore just got made to look like a damn fool. Protesters want Ray Lewis's statue torn down because he turned against them now because he knelt in prayer. And the Ravens defense, let's face it, they played pretty good the first 2 weeks. They went to London, and I'm thoroughly convinced a rugby team was wearing those Ravens uniforms that went out there to play football against the Jaguars that week. I think the Ravens, who play the Steelers relatively tough all the time, I think they're going to be gunning for Big Ben. Le'Veon Bell has struggled against the Ravens. This is not going to be an easy game for him. We've just spoken about his struggles. I'm going to say if you got Ben, bench him because his numbers have dropped. Last week, he only put up 11 points from a fantasy aspect. I wouldn't expect much more than 11 to 12 points this week. And there are probably 5 or 6 quarterbacks that are available on waivers right now, if you don't have a quality backup for them, that are probably going to put up more points than Ben Roethlisberger this week.
I don't want to I don't want to disagree with you on that one. I feel all your points are valid. But like I said before, the only thing I can't explain or understand that has occurred this year is that Pittsburgh offense and how bad it's been. I'm going to assume at some point they bounce back. And you're right, Baltimore is a bad matchup. But considering how things have been going, watch them put 40 on them.
Shut up. You're going to make me mad. Because that's the way this season has gone. And with that, I guess we'll wrap up our first fantasy football with the Fog on Objectively Biased with me, the objective one, of course, and my man Big D over there, the biased one. You got any final thoughts over here on this?
Final thoughts, quit fantasy football, people. It's a lot of effort for little to no gain. Seriously. We put in all this effort. We study all the things. These coaches say, I'm going to do this year. And then the season comes around and they don't fucking do it.
And then you go, why did I draft this guy? Why did I draft this guy? Shit, oh, damn it.
Exactly.
That's it. And with that note, thank you for watching. If you got any questions, again, feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel, Objectively Biased. Follow me on Instagram, _the Fog, and on Twitter at @SFogMeg. Twitter handle the Fog, of course. You can find me in Objectively Biased Sports Talk chat group on Facebook and 2 Minute Warning Sports on Facebook as well. Again, fantasy football, we're going to be here every week for you. Have a good night.
Ooh.